all the way from Russia. I'm going to look at this. Nikita Zhavoronkov. He's a professor in Russia. Talks about Bitcoin, and this is his. Well, he gives lots of talks in Russia, but this is his first talk in English. So good luck. Yeah, here.
Well, hello. Is it working? Yes. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nikita Zhavoronkov, and I'm glad to see you all here today in this lovely city, Arnhem. I'm a co-founder of a blockchain analytics and search engine called Blockchair. Maybe some of you have already seen my slides or charts in my Twitter account. And today I'm going to tell you all about the reasons why Bitcoin needs a scaling solution. My presentation will be sort of introduction to some of the following speakers' talks about different scaling solutions, and I hope you will like it. So besides developing Blockchain, I also teach my own course on blockchain and cryptocurrency at the National Research Nuclear University in Moscow. And from my personal experience, the audience, my students, just love and explain like I'm five approach, especially when I speak about things like hash functions or Merkle trees. So I'm going to try something similar with the scaling issues. Well, imagine a bus that arrives to the bus station every 10 minutes, and it has a capacity as high as 10 passengers. Everything works fine, while there are only 10 or less passengers on the bus stop. However, the number of people could be more than 10. Well, that's obvious. So, is this working? Well, it's not working. Sorry. So we have a situation where the demand is higher than the supply. Since we are drawing an analogy with Bitcoin, let's also suppose that the director of the bus park also decided that he can get bigger buses or increase the number of buses, so to lower the time between two buses. So how do people usually deal with situations like this? They start to outbid each other until someone gives up. But that's not really a good solution because of two reasons. The first reason is that one person remains at the bus stop and all others have potentially overpaid for their tickets a very large amount of money. And that's a terrible user experience for everyone at the bus stop. But since we're at the Future of Bitcoin conference, not at the Future of Transportation conference, let's take a closer look at Bitcoin. From the Bitcoin blockchain perspective, we also have the same situation. We can imagine blocks as buses, which arrive each 10 minutes in average. We have that blasted 1 megabyte limit. We can imagine that passengers or people are transactions. There are backlog of transactions or backlog of people waiting for a block for a bus. And the bus stop is Bitcoin mempool. So I hope that the analogy is good. So let's calculate the Bitcoin blockchain capacity. The average transaction size is approximately 500 bytes. Then we divide this megabyte by 500 bytes, and we get 2,000 transactions per block. As a new block comes every 10 minutes, that gives us approximately slightly more than 3 transactions per second, and as you understand, that's quite a sad number. So in comparison, PayPal can process up to 500 transactions per second at peaks, while Visa gives us 56,000 figure. It's worth to mention that the average throughput is significantly smaller because payment systems should plan the capacity based on peaks instead of average use. So we can see that Bitcoin is not only overloaded at peaks, but it's overloaded all the time, constantly. Other cryptocurrencies have bigger capacity. Well, for example, the Bitcoin's main competitor, Ethereum, can process up to 25 transactions per second. But we should also mention that, of course, that's comparing apples to oranges, because Visa and PayPal, these are all centralized systems, while Bitcoin is a decentralized system. But either way, these are the numbers, the figures we should aim for. So we don't have to stop at 3 transactions per second. So now let's finally proceed to some charts. The first chart shows us the median and average block size over the last 2 years. Well, unfortunately, for over a year now, we have constantly full blocks. The average value is not exactly 1 megabyte, but that's because some miners still using so-called SPV or headerless mining, which sometimes gives us empty blocks. So we were talking about people who are overbidding each other at the bus stop. So what happens with Bitcoin transaction fees? Here we can see an exponential growth in fees. We can also note a small bump on the slide. We'll come back to it later. Some people say that fees are growing only because of the Bitcoin price rise. Let's see if they are correct. So as we can see here, we can observe the exactly same growth rate in millibitcoins. So they are wrong. The fees rising not only in dollars, but also in bitcoins. And note that bump is also here. So let's try to make a small forecast on what happens next. Let's lay the block size chart over the average transaction fee chart and put the latter one on a log scale. So what we'll have. What we can see here is a perfect exponential trend since the blocks got full. So you can see that the median block size became, when the median block size became 1 megabyte, we have an exponential trend, and it's rising with big speed. So what's our forecast? So 2 years ago, we had an average fee of 2 cents. Just a year ago, the fee was 20 cents, and now we pay more than $2. So who can guess what happens next? $20 a year from now, $200 2 years from now. Well, I believe that's not sustainable, and that's because Bitcoin is not the only cryptocurrency. There are competitors, and as I have already said, that the most notorious among them is Ethereum. So I'm not going to pump Ethereum here, since it's Bitcoin is the future of Bitcoin conference, but I have to show you some charts about Ethereum. So here we have the chart which shows the number of daily Bitcoin transactions versus Ethereum since the beginning of the current year. What we can see is that different use cases are flowing from Bitcoin into Ethereum, and the same happens with different all other cryptocurrencies like Monero, Dash, Zcash. Darknet markets began to accept different cryptocurrencies in May, including Ethereum. The ICO hype train happens in another blockchain, as we can see it, and so on. Consequently, it has influenced market capitalizations. This chart shows us how big is Ethereum market cap is compared to Bitcoin. In the beginning of June, Ethereum market cap hit 85% of Bitcoins, and the flipping so many people are talking about almost happened. Well, we were very close. And right now, the ratio is at almost 70%. So let's stop pumping Ethereum and get back to our topic, why Bitcoin needs a scaling solution. Well, it should be obvious by now, as we have just seen, Bitcoin's network capacity is small and have already hit its limit. The transaction fees become more and more insane. But most importantly, Bitcoin has to survive its competition and need to progress. So, now we know why we need a scaling solution, but let's think about this through. The question we've been asking here, why Bitcoin needs a scaling solution, was wrong all along. Bitcoin doesn't need just one technical solution for scaling, it needs multiple solutions. So what are these solutions? Well, first of all, there should be an on-chain scaling solution, well, increasing the block size limit or decreasing the time between blocks. And then there should be a second layer solution. They are called off-chain solutions. But neither alone is sufficient for Bitcoin to scale up to the world's population. So what's the difference between on-chain and off-chain solutions? Let's take a closer look. Why do we need both? Well, first example would be when Alice pays Bob a huge amount of Bitcoin, or when she is transferring her property to Bob by time-stamping something into the blockchain. That would be an on-chain transaction, and the result will be one transaction in blockchain. An example of an off-chain transaction, a series of off-chain transactions would be the following. For example, let's assume that Bob consults Alice via Skype and wants to receive a payment for each minute he's online. So they should open a channel, a payment channel for their microtransactions. So they could have an infinite amount of off-chain transactions, but they will eventually have to close that channel. And so we will have two on-chain transactions, one for opening the channel and one for closing the channel. So while such an approach gives us unlimited number of transactions, microtransactions between Alice and Bob, we still have to write somewhere two on-chain transactions. And this somewhere is the Bitcoin blockchain. So why does Bitcoin need a scaling solution? And why off-chain solution only won't be enough? Well, first of all, off-chain solutions like Lightning networks, as I have already said, need to open and close payment channels between users somewhere, and that's Bitcoin blockchain. So every Lightning user will have to use the on-chain space too. The second issue that in order for these solutions like Lightning Network to stay decentralized, users should be able to open and close multiple channels. Well, if we have a scheme where one user have only one channel, it's not going to be a decentralized system, it will be a centralized system, because everyone will be connected to something like big bank hubs and operate through them. So given that there are more than 1 billion people who live on less than $2 a day, we should have reasonable fees for on-chain transactions so people could open and close channels. Many people forget that the blockchain also has non-monetary use cases. Well, monetary use case, for example, as I have already said, that when Alice pays Bob some amount of Bitcoins. Well, Alice could also simply timestamp something or notarize a hash of her document on the blockchain, and that would be on-chain transaction too, but it can't be scaled off-chain. So we just put some information in the blockchain, and that's it. Currently, all colored tokens, colored coins and tokens working on top of the Bitcoin blockchain, they all require special OP return outputs in order to work. So the problem here is that there is no off-chain scaling solution which right now supports such type of outputs. So there we can't scale tokens into that layer. there are two more issues many people forget about when they're saying that we do not need an on-chain solution. The first one is that darknet users, darknet market users, and some privacy nuts are highly dependent on mixers, which are currently also depend on on-chain space. And do not forget that darknet users represent a substantial share of Bitcoin users. And the latter issue is that the cost of a spam attack on the Bitcoin blockchain highly depends on how much free space there is and how huge the transaction backlog already is. So the bigger the backlog, the easier and cheaper to spam the network further. Here, just one more chart. When we were talking about tokens and colored coins built on Bitcoin, we mentioned a special type of outputs called null data or OP return outputs. And let's see how widely are they used. Well, not very widely, because transaction fees for such outputs are as high as for normal transaction, ordinary transactions. Well, meanwhile, I'm once again pumping Ethereum, sorry. Well, meanwhile, the token hype happens on the Ethereum blockchain instead of Bitcoin. If we have solved these issues 2 years ago, maybe we had this hype here in Bitcoin, in the Bitcoin blockchain, and the price would have been, well, not $2,000, but 20,000, like something like that. But of course, we need an off-chain solution as well. We can't use micropayments, or we can't optimize many transactions between two users without such a solution. Well, because we can add more DEX to the two-decker bus. Well, we can add 1, 2, 3 DEX, but eventually it will fall. We can't do it forever, so if we draw an analogy in Bitcoin, we can increase the block size up to 10 megabytes, maybe 100 megabytes, but we can't eventually have it as 1 exabyte blocks or something like this. So to summarize everything I have said, if we won't have solution at all, I believe that Ethereum, sorry once again, and other cryptocurrencies will overtake Bitcoin this year. The flipping can really happen. If we have an on-chain solution only, no one will be eventually able to run a full node. If we have an off-chain solution only, like Lightning Network on top of 1 megabyte blocks, it will lead to a centralized settlement system, and that won't be good either. So what we need is both solutions. Only then Bitcoin will be able to adopt the entire 7.5 billion population, and then the future of Bitcoin will be bright, I believe. So thank you for your attention. Here are my contacts. I really hope you liked my presentation, and my first speech in English was a success. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
If you have any questions, I will be glad.
Well, we've got time for questions. Questions, anyone?
Yes.
All right, we got one back there, and that was excellent, and the slides too, and great English.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna kill someone if I keep throwing this too far. But...
What was the green Pepe on your slides?
Green what?
Oh.
Green. Well, that's what the dragon dance trolls.
Okay, thanks.
It's an inside joke.
Okay. Anyone else?
Really? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.